Hello, thank you for joining us. And the objective of today's presentation is to help students and others understand what this APICS certification is all about. And so I'm Professor Samir Prasad at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. And to help us in this endeavor is Bob. Bob, can you tell a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Bob Reynolds, and I've been with APICS for a very long time. And in addition to being an instructor, I'm basically the certified master instructor, their highest level. And I've had opportunities. I spent a lot of time working at Briggs & Stratton Corporation here in the Milwaukee area. Before that, I was with Parker Penn and some other companies. So had a lot of opportunities to see some really good stuff and grow up and evolve with APICS throughout the years.
Yeah, so in this endeavor, what we're trying to do is bring the academics, and we're tying that with the real-world experience that Bob has, and then that kind of gets encapsulated in this APICS. And we have different modules that we're going to cover, and we're going to look at them next. So Bob, given your history and experience, can you just tell us a little bit about the CPIM exam, what it is about, who are involved with it, different types of exams, and then what are the different modules?
Sure. Well, as the screen says, APICS has been around since actually the 60s, but we started with a certification process in 1973. And the real purpose of the certification process is to come up with a common language and a common way of doing things so that we can talk to one another and understand what each individual is talking about. And as you can see, there's been over 100,000 people that have been certified. It's become kind of the gold standard, and many job applications say a certification in APICS is very desirable. Okay, we started out in the U.S., but have, of course, now it's international. We get North America, South America, the Asian countries, and of course Europe. All over the world is participating in APICS. So CPIM, Certified Production Inventory Management, really is about the internal excellence of your operation. It's how can I operate in the most effective manner possible. And what it does is, where do the numbers come from? That's what we're going to kind of go through. Where do the numbers, where does the plan, how do I plan my production, how do I plan my sales, and that kind of thing. Okay, so there is another APICS certification program called CSCP, or Certified Supply Chain Management, and that is more focused on the entire supply chain, that being from raw material all the way through to the customer, and sometimes in reverse as the product is returned. So those are the two major modules that APICS provides for us. Okay, but in CPIM there's basically 5 modules. There's the basics of supply chain management, which is an overview course. It sort of touches on everything that the body of knowledge is all about. So it starts out at the very highest level and works its all the way down to execution and control. Then we have 3 what we'll call more fundamental modules. The first one being the master planning of resources. We create a sales and operations plan, we create a master schedule, and from that, then we can go into detailed scheduling, which is what you would normally call MRP. Once we have a good solid MRP, now we can begin to execute that plan. The plan by creating shop orders, creating purchase orders, and then controlling that through the monitoring of the operations to make sure they're actually happening. The 5th module is called Strategic Management of Resources. And Strategic Management of Resources basically is saying, okay, given the kind of company we are, what is the best use of the tools? Because just like a plumber or a carpenter, which screwdriver am I going to use? Which nail gun do I use? What do I use given this situation? So that's a real quick overview.
Yeah,
of
and
what
we'll go more
CPIM
in detail. So what we do, this gives you a little history and the background and gives you an idea of the different type of certification exams and then the different modules. So before we go into what some of the modules are about, we're going to learn a little bit about taking tests and how to prepare for it. So Bob, since you are the, you not only train, but you have the trainer, you're a trainer, it'd be nice to just give an indication of what kind of materials you need to study, and then how you pull it all together.
Okay. Well, you want next slide? Okay, so there's a couple of ways, basic ways to do that. Number one, APICS has courses that we will, with an instructor, will walk you through the process, and this is what the body of knowledge is all about. That's one way to do that. But you don't have to take a course. You can study on your own. You can get the materials from APICS or other areas, and you can learn this on your own. So
and some people ask, for example, here at Whitewater, we got a lot of courses in supply chain management, operations management, and our job as and that's what I view, is that it's not to teach you for certification. That is a job of a different industry board. And there are different groups. There's other groups that do a very good job too. So our job is not to certify you. Our job is to educate you and to have a long-term learning ability. So we'll give you this. So if we teach forecasting, we'll not only tell you techniques that APICS will use, but then forecasting will give you a wider range of tools. So there's all kinds, because we really don't know where you'll end up in your career. But let me just go back to our earlier slide, and there are certain things you might want to, if you're trying to study on yourself or even with others, there's certain things you want to look at. For example, there are study guides that APICS provides, right?
Yes. APICS will provide a study guide, basically a book that outlines step by step, this is what this body of knowledge is all about. And there's one for each module.
Okay. And then there are some books that you would suggest, right?
Right. All of my classes, the first thing I do is say, okay, I can explain what we're trying to learn here. The book will help you further study, but there are still going to be problems, because after we leave class, you need to go and take the test, and you might run into what is this all about? So I always recommend that there are two different books that can be used as background if you're taking a class. One of them is the Introduction to Materials Management, and it's the APICS edition, which I recommend, and that's by Arnold and Chapman and Clive. The other one is Manufacturing Planning Control, Supply Chain Management, the CPIM edition. Obviously, it follows the same kind of logic that CPIM. So I ask my students to participate in class, learn as much as you can, but use these books as a reference. Now, if you choose not to go to class, to be an instructor-led class, both of these books would be key to your understanding. Yeah. In fact, I had one student in my supply chain class who became certified in production inventory control, CPIM, and he said he used the Introduction to Materials Management as his sole study guide. Now, he really read the book. He didn't just read it, but he read it for understanding. He answered the questions at the end of the chapters, and so he gleaned the understanding, and then he was able to take the test.
Yeah. And that's one thing very important. And of course, I'm coming from an academic background. When you're a student and you go to the university, you take classes and you'll study for a test. But one of the things that we would like to do is to encourage lifelong learning. So you should be comfortable to take a book from the library or purchase a book or whatever and read it and understand. Now there's other stuff like, for example, APICS. If you're an APICS member, it's free, but you have the APICS dictionary. So that's terminology.
Right.
Because the terminology we might teach in class might be slightly different than the terminology that APICS has, which is fine. And then they might have new technologies like apps to help you learn it.
Exactly.
So this is how to study, and then we already talked about how to study, whether you want to study individually or with others. It's always a good idea, by the way, whether you're in a class or you're going to be studying independently, to work in groups. That's something
Sure.
that is true in all the cases.
Yeah.
So let's go through and talk a little bit about taking the exam. You know, what do you need to know? How should you study? And passing and so on.
Okay. Every module has an exam content manual, which again comes with the participant guides, whether you take the instructor-led or you do it on your own. If you don't have that, you can buy it, and I highly recommend it. It's not very expensive, and you can get it for all 5 modules. The exam content will show you the vocabulary you need for this particular exam. It will outline exactly what you need to study, what you need to know, and it gives you some sample questions which are indicative of what you'll see on the test. So that's one thing to do. And also, you know, while we are trying to pass this exam, you can't pass the exam based on memorization, in my opinion. Memorization is that's okay, but really what we try to do is understand what is this all about? Whether you're talking about a forecast or whether you're talking about where the information goes next and those kind of things. If you understand it, now you can answer the question how to apply it, because the test is going to be on not memorization, but on applying the knowledge. Okay?
Understanding the concepts behind them. I think that's critical.
Yes. So again, if you understand it, then you can, when the question comes a little bit different than you were taught or the book says, you can apply that knowledge, and you can logically come up and say, yeah, okay, the answer should be, which is what the real world is. The real world is not black and white. You're not going to come into your job and everything's going to be just the way that they said it was in the textbook. You have to apply your knowledge to come up with the right answer.
Now, there are 5 modules,
Yes.
and you need to pass all 5 to be certified.
Correct.
And is there a percentage, like say there are 100 questions, how many questions are there in each module, and how many percent-wise you need to pass?
Okay, this is a very difficult question to answer, because it's very statistically oriented. And APICS partners with a company that does does testing, and every question has been vetted. You know, they'll look at how the people that do really well answered this particular question, and they'll come up with a percentage and so on and so forth, and to say you have to get a passing score of 300.
Okay, so you need a score of 300 out of what?
Well, the total is out of 330. So if you get a perfect score, it'd be 330. You have to get a 300.
Okay.
But every question isn't the same value.
Okay.
So it's very difficult.
Okay, so at least it gives a sense of what, I'm just trying to get a sense of what the expectations are. Now, the other question students have, there are 5 modules, and
Yes.
is there a sequence in terms of taking, which one should I take first and last?
Right. Highly recommended that you take them in the sequence that we're going to talk about. The basics of supply chain management, master planning, resources, detailed scheduling, the execution and control, and then strategic management. Because the information builds on itself. You start up at the top with master planning, and from master planning you come up with your detailed schedule. From the detailed schedule you come up with your execution plan. So it would be very difficult to step into, say, the execution phase, the 4th module, and learn, you need to learn everything above it. So we highly recommend you take them in that order. You don't have to. You can take them in any order you choose. What I absolutely recommend is you save strategic management for the last module.
And that actually grabs stuff and brings stuff from the other modules. So yeah, that is recommended. Now, the exam, when you go, is 3 hours in length, I'm told.
Yes.
Now, that's plenty of time.
Yes.
So you go ahead. What is
okay. Well, for instance, there's one of the modules is 75 questions, I believe basics is a little bit more, but 75 questions, you have 3 hours. So you have plenty of time. The questions are not difficult from a reading standpoint. You don't read a whole paragraph and then answer the question. Typically, it's one line.
And it's multiple choice.
And it's multiple choice. So you have, and you'll have 4 choices. So the whole test is multiple choice. Answer every question. There's no penalty for being wrong. So you want to guess. If you have to guess, guess. You can mark. It's a computer-based test. You can mark questions and go back and review them. You can review the entire exam. And the math, whatever math there is not very difficult. They'll give you you can use your computer calculator, thank you, or they'll give you a calculator. Okay. One more thing about taking the test. It's a testing service that you go to. Now that APICS is partnered with, and they're very strict. You got to have the right IDs. You got to. And you have to empty up your pockets. I'm told the women have to take their earrings off. And it's very strict. And there'll be other people taking other tests in the room. So
and they might have nothing to do with the APICS.
And they have nothing to do with APICS. It's a testing center for all kinds of tests. Okay.
So that tells us a little bit about how to take the test. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go through, and already we talked about the sequence of flow. So we do basic supply chain management, do that first. Then you can choose any of those 3. There's no reason for one or the other?
I would recommend in order.
Okay.
But yes, you can do any of those 3 because they are detailed enough that you can study execution control of operations. But if you really do need to know where the numbers came from.
It's also like mind thinking flowing through.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yes. And we've gone through that.
Yeah.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the different modules.